Welcome to the Sacred Rift, where we explore Jung's depth psychology to uncover your true self. Join us to face your shadow, heal your soul, and find your purpose. This is Maya, a 35-year-old teacher known for her calm demeanor and endless patience. To her friends and students, she is a rock-steady, reliable, and composed. But beneath this peaceful exterior lies a secret, lifelong battle with shame. It's a quiet, cold feeling that descends whenever she feels a strong emotion, whispering a familiar, painful message: you are too much. To understand Maya's silent struggle, we must look beyond the surface of her calm and capable life. The shame she carries is not a loud, dramatic entity. It is a ghost, a quiet and constant presence that haunts the hallways of her inner world. It's a phantom that has been with her for so long that she has mistaken its chilling presence for a fundamental part of her own nature. Its work is subtle but devastating. It operates like a master switch inside her, one that is expertly flicked off the moment any genuine, high-voltage emotion threatens to surge through her system. Consider a moment from a few months ago. Maya had been working tirelessly with one of her students, a young boy who had been struggling immensely with reading. For weeks, they had worked together, patiently sounding out words, celebrating the smallest victories. Then, one afternoon, the boy picked up a book and read an entire page aloud, fluently and with confidence. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over Maya. It was a feeling so bright and powerful it felt like a starburst in her chest. For a glorious, unguarded second, she felt the urge to laugh out loud, to maybe even do a little victory dance right there in the quiet classroom. But then, almost as quickly as the joy arrived, the ghost appeared. An invisible hand seemed to reach out and clamp down on her heart. A cold wave washed away the warmth, and a familiar voice whispered in the back of her mind. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just a small success. Control yourself." Her posture, which had been open and expansive, instantly tightened. The brilliant smile on her face softened into a small, polite, and more acceptable version of itself. The surge of joy was contained, suppressed, and neatly filed away. And in its place, a faint, metallic taste of shame lingered on her tongue. She felt embarrassed by the intensity of her own happiness, as if it were something improper, something to be hidden. This internal drama plays out in countless scenarios. When a driver cuts her off in traffic, a flash of legitimate anger rises, hot and sharp. But before it can even fully form, the ghost is there, whispering, "Calm down. Getting angry is so ugly. It's not worth it." The anger immediately curdles into a sour, self-directed frustration. When she watches a sad film and feels tears welling up in her eyes, the voice murmurs, "You're so sensitive. Why do you let things affect you so much?" The genuine, cleansing sadness is quickly dammed up, leaving behind a residue of quiet self-loathing. Every authentic emotional impulse is met with this immediate, internal censor. She lives her life with the volume turned down, her emotional landscape a place of muted tones and carefully managed weather patterns, terrified of a storm she can feel brewing just over the horizon. To understand where this ghost came from, we must travel back to the place where most of our ghosts are born, the landscape of childhood. Maya grew up in a loving home. There was no overt cruelty, no shouting or dramatic conflict. Her parents were good, decent people who provided for her, encouraged her academic achievements, and told her they loved her. But their love was expressed in a language of quiet duty and reserved affection. It was a home where emotions were treated like a delicate, potentially dangerous substance, something to be handled with extreme care, kept in small, manageable doses, and never, ever spilled. As a child, Maya was naturally expressive. She was a vibrant, passionate little girl who felt everything with a fierce intensity. When she was happy, her laughter was a loud, uninhibited cascade of sound that filled the entire house. When she was sad, her sobs were stormy and theatrical. When she was angry, her small face would flush with a righteous fury. She was, in essence, emotionally alive. But in the quiet, emotionally restrained ecosystem of her family, her vibrancy was seen as a disruption. It was too loud, too messy, too unpredictable. Her parents, unable to manage their own discomfort with such raw displays of feeling, began to gently, and with the best of intentions, prune her back. Her loud laughter would be met with a gentle, "All right, Maya, that's enough now. Settle down." Her stormy tears would be met with a well-meaning, "There's no need to be so dramatic. It's not that big of a deal." Her flashes of anger were the most threatening of all, met with a firm, disappointed tone. "We don't use that tone of voice in this house. That's an unacceptable way to behave." The message, repeated over thousands of small interactions, was consistent and clear: "Your emotions are too much. They are a problem. To be loved and accepted here, you must contain them." They weren't saying, "We can't handle your feelings," they were saying, "Your feelings are wrong." And as a child whose survival depends on the love and approval of her caregivers, Maya did what any child would do. She adapted. She learned to trim herself down to fit the emotional confines of her home. She became the good girl, the calm one, the easy child. She learned to swallow her tears, to stifle her laughter, to choke back her anger. She unconsciously created the persona of the patient, composed woman she is today, not as a genuine expression of her nature, but as a sophisticated survival strategy. The ghost of shame was born in those moments, created to police the borders of her own heart and ensure that nothing unacceptable ever escaped. This brings us to one of the most profound and liberating truths in psychology. Much of the shame that we carry, the shame that feels so deeply personal, so inextricably linked to who we are, is not actually ours. It is inherited. It is a second-hand ghost, a psychic heirloom passed down from one generation to the next. The best way to understand this is to think of shame as a heavy, old, ill-fitting coat. Imagine that when you were a small child, your parents gave you this coat. It's too big, it's drab, and it smells faintly of mothballs and someone else's sorrow. But they tell you, this is your coat now. You must wear it. And because you are a child and you trust them implicitly, you put it on. At first, it's clumsy and uncomfortable. It restricts your movement and makes it hard to play. But over time, you get used to it. You wear it every single day in all kinds of weather. You wear it for so long that you forget what it feels like to not have it on. You forget the feeling of the sun on your skin, of the wind in your hair. The coat becomes a part of you. You start to believe that its heavy, restrictive weight is your own, that its drab color is the natural shade of your own being. You no longer see it as a coat, you see it as your skin. This is what happened to Maya. The shame she feels about her emotions is not a true reflection of some inherent flaw in her character. It is the heavy, second-hand coat of her parents' own emotional limitations. Her parents were not bad people, they were simply people who were uncomfortable with strong feelings, likely because their parents were uncomfortable with strong feelings. They were carrying their own inherited coat. When Maya's natural, healthy emotional vibrancy emerged, it triggered their own discomfort, their own unhealed wounds. They couldn't handle the reflection of the emotional life they themselves had learned to suppress. A child's mind, in its brilliant and desperate attempt to make sense of the world and secure its place in it, will always perform an incredible act of psychological alchemy. When faced with a parent's disapproval, a child will almost never conclude, "My parents are limited and cannot handle my emotional intensity." That would be too terrifying. It would mean the people she depends on for survival are flawed and unsafe. Instead, the child will always conclude, "There must be something wrong with me." She will choose to believe I am bad over the unbearable alternative that her caregivers are inadequate. And so Maya took her parents' anxiety and discomfort and she stitched it into the lining of her own soul, labeling it shame. She put on their coat and convinced herself it was her own skin. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow illuminates this dynamic with breathtaking clarity. The shadow, according to Jung, is the unconscious part of our personality. The dark side where we banish all the aspects of ourselves that we deem unacceptable, both to ourselves and to society. It is the repository for our repressed instincts, our negative emotions like rage and envy, and our unlived potentials. It is everything we do not want to be. For Maya's parents, their own emotional vibrancy, their own capacity for loud laughter, stormy tears, and righteous anger was a part of their shadow. For whatever reason, early in their own lives, they had learned that these qualities were bad or unacceptable. So they pushed them down, locked them away in the unconscious, and built a conscious personality that was calm, reserved, and in control. They were living as only half of themselves. But the shadow does not simply disappear when it is repressed. It remains alive and active in the unconscious, and it seeks expression. One of the primary ways it does this is through projection. We start to see the disowned parts of ourselves in other people, and we often react to them with intense, irrational judgment or irritation. When Maya's parents saw her uninhibited emotional expression, they were unconsciously seeing a reflection of their own abandoned shadow self. Her vitality reminded them of the very parts of themselves they had worked so hard to deny. Their need to control her was, at its core, a desperate attempt to control their own inner world. Jung wrote, in a sentence that holds the key to countless family tragedies, nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their children than the unlived life of the parent. This is precisely what happened to Maya. She was not just being raised by her parents, she was being shaped by their ghosts, by the shadows of the lives they never allowed themselves to live. The shame she feels is the weight of their unlived emotional life. She became the carrier of their repressed vibrancy. Her shame is not a sign that she is flawed. It is a sign that she is haunted by the unlived life of those who came before her. Unmasking this ghost, realizing that the cold presence that follows her is not her own soul but an inherited phantom, is the first, crucial step toward her own liberation. For years, Maya existed within this self-imposed emotional prison, mistaking its cold, familiar walls for the natural boundaries of her own personality. The voice of shame was so constant, so deeply integrated into her inner monologue, that she no longer recognized it as a separate entity. It was simply the voice of reason, the sound of her own mature and responsible self, guiding her away from the messy and undignified territory of strong feelings. She had become an expert at managing the ghost, but the cost was immense. She lived a life of quiet desperation, feeling a profound sense of disconnection not only from others but, more painfully, from herself. She was a calm, placid lake, unaware of the powerful, churning river that was frozen deep beneath her surface. The turning point, when it came, was not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, almost imperceptible crack in the ice. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. She was having dinner with her closest friend, Anna, a woman whose emotional landscape was a vibrant, sun-drenched Italian countryside compared to Maya's carefully manicured English garden. Earlier that day, Maya had received an email from the principal of her school, informing her that a program she had designed and championed for months, a creative writing initiative for underprivileged students, had just secured significant funding from the district. It was a huge professional and personal victory, the culmination of immense effort and passion. As she recounted the news to Anna, she did so in her typical, understated way. "So, yeah, it was some good news today," she said, stirring her pasta with a faint casualness. "The writing program got the funding, so that's nice. It'll be good for the kids." Anna put down her fork and looked at her, her gaze both warm and piercingly direct. "Nice? Maya, that's not nice. That's incredible. You've been pouring your heart into this for a year. You should be shouting from the rooftops." Maya felt a familiar heat rise in her cheeks. The ghost was instantly at her side, whispering its toxic comforts. "Don't make a big deal out of it. It's arrogant to celebrate yourself. Be humble." She gave a small, self-deprecating shrug. "Oh, it wasn't just me. A lot of people helped. I'm just glad it came through." Anna leaned forward, her expression softening. She didn't challenge Maya's words, but she questioned the feeling behind them. "I'm so happy for you," she said gently. "But can I ask you something? Why do you always dim your own light? It's like you're afraid to let yourself fully feel your own success, your own joy." The question landed not like an accusation, but like a key turning in a rusty lock. No one had ever named it so clearly before. Dim her own light. That was exactly what it felt like. In that moment, something inside Maya shifted. The thick, foggy presence of the shame seemed to thin, just for a second, and she was able to see it with a sliver of objectivity. The shame wasn't protecting her, it was diminishing her. It wasn't a sign of maturity, it was a cage. That simple, compassionate question from her friend became a catalyst. It planted a seed of curiosity in the barren soil of her self-judgment. For the first time, instead of automatically obeying the internal command to suppress her feelings, Maya began to observe it. She started a new kind of inner watchfulness. A few days later, a colleague made a thoughtless comment that hurt her feelings. Her immediate, conditioned response was to swallow the hurt and pretend everything was fine. But this time she paused. She noticed the familiar clenching in her stomach, the immediate impulse to retreat. And she asked herself a new question. It was a question that would change the entire direction of her inner life. She moved from the shame-filled, dead-end question of "what is wrong with me that I'm so sensitive" to the powerful, open-ended question of "whose voice is this?" As she sat with that question, an image flashed in her mind with startling clarity. It was her mother's face, not angry, but etched with a familiar look of pained discomfort from years ago, on a day when a younger Maya had burst into tears over a broken toy. She could almost hear her mother's voice, a tone laden with gentle disappointment, saying, "Oh, Maya, don't be such a crybaby. You're too sensitive for your own good." It was a revelation. The voice that she had always assumed was her own, the voice of her own rational adult self, was not her own at all. It was a recording, a psychic artifact, the voice of her mother's anxiety. She had internalized it so completely that she had mistaken the echo for the source. This realization did not instantly banish the shame, but it fundamentally changed her relationship to it. She was no longer a prisoner arguing with her own reflection in the cell wall. She was beginning to see the bars of the cage for what they were, something constructed a long time ago by someone else. She was beginning to understand that she was haunted not by a personal failing but by an inherited ghost. This journey of differentiation, of separating our own true self from the inherited voices of our past, lies at the very heart of psychological healing. And it finds a powerful, dramatic parallel in the harrowing inner work of Carl Jung himself. His descent into the unconscious, so vividly chronicled in his legendary Red Book, was not a gentle, academic exercise. It was a brutal, terrifying confrontation with the darkest, most unacceptable parts of his own being, with his shadow. Jung, the respected doctor, the sophisticated intellectual, the civilized European man, had built a conscious persona of goodness, wisdom, and control. But as he plunged into the depths of his own psyche, he was met with figures and impulses that threatened to shatter this persona completely. He was confronted with immense, primordial rage, a force so powerful it terrified him. In one of his most disturbing visions, he dreamt that he and a group of companions came across the mythical hero Siegfried. And to his waking horror, Jung's dream self raised a rifle and shot Siegfried dead. The conscious Jung was appalled. Siegfried was a symbol of heroism, of light, of the ambitious, goal-oriented everything a successful man in his society was supposed to be. To murder him was an act of pure, nihilistic violence. His first instinct, the instinct of his ego, was to recoil in disgust, to condemn this part of himself, to label it as evil and push it back down into the darkness where it belonged. This is what most of us do when we encounter our own shadow, our own unacceptable rage, our envy, our greed. We feel a surge of shame and immediately try to disown it, saying, "That's not me." But Jung, in a moment of profound courage, did something different. He realized that to run from this vision, to deny this murderous impulse within himself, would be to remain divided and incomplete. He understood that this horrifying image was a symbolic message from his soul. He had to sit with it. He had to understand it. He had to, in a sense, befriend this inner murderer. He entered into a dialogue with this dark part of himself and came to a stunning realization. The rage he felt, the impulse to destroy the hero, was not just a negative, destructive force. It was also the voice of a deep, authentic part of him that was being suffocated by his own heroic ambitions. It was the part of him that was tired of striving, tired of being the good doctor, tired of the relentless pressure to be a shining light. The rage was also a source of immense vitality, a raw, untamed life force that he had repressed in the service of being civilized. It was his own too-muchness. By refusing to disown this shadow aspect, by having the courage to face it and integrate it, Jung did not become a murderer. He became whole. He learned that the shadow is not something to be vanquished, but something to be understood and incorporated. It holds the very energy, the raw material that we have cut ourselves off from. Our rage holds our passion and our boundaries. Our grief holds our capacity for love. Our envy shows us what we secretly long for. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim the lost territories of the soul. Maya, in learning to question the voice of shame, was embarking on the very same journey. She was beginning to understand that her too-muchness, the emotional intensity she had been taught to fear and suppress, was not her enemy. It was her power. It was her life force, knocking on the door, asking to be let back in. This process of reclaiming the exiled parts of ourselves is not just a fascinating psychological theory. It is a practical path to healing that we can all begin to walk. It starts with a conscious and compassionate form of self-reflection. The first step is to identify the shame. This requires a gentle, non-judgmental curiosity. The next time you feel that familiar, cold wave of shame, pause. Don't push it away. Instead, get specific. What exactly are you ashamed of in this moment? Is it a feeling, like anger or excitement? Is it a desire, like the longing for rest or recognition? Is it a personality trait, like being sensitive or ambitious? Take out a journal and write it down with as much honesty as you can muster. For Maya, the sentence was clear: I am ashamed of the intensity of my emotions. The second step is the one that Maya discovered with her friend. You must listen for the voice. Close your eyes for a moment. Bring the feeling of the shame into your body. Where do you feel it? Is it a tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach? Stay with the physical sensation. Now ask the question inwardly: whose voice is this? Whose judgment am I feeling right now? Let your mind be quiet and just listen. Don't search for an answer, let the answer emerge. You might hear a specific phrase, as Maya did. You might see a clear image of a persona parent, a teacher, a childhood bully. You might simply hear a tone of voice, disappointed, critical, sarcastic. The goal is to separate yourself from the voice, to recognize it as an external broadcast that you have mistakenly internalized as your own inner truth. The final step is perhaps the most powerful. It is to symbolically give the shame back. This is not an act of angry confrontation, but an act of compassionate self-liberation. You can do this by writing a short letter in your journal. You don't ever have to send it, its power lies in the psychological act of writing it. The letter is addressed to the source of the voice you identified. Maya might write a letter to her mother. It could say something like this. Dear Mom, for my entire life I have carried the belief that my strong feelings are too much and something to be ashamed of. Today I realize that this belief isn't truly mine. It's a reflection of the discomfort you felt around big emotions. I know you were doing the best you could with what you were taught, and I know you love me. I am not angry with you, but I can no longer carry the weight of this for you. This heavy coat of shame belongs to a story that started long before me. And so, with love and with respect for my own well-being, I am giving it back. I am choosing to learn how to embrace all of my feelings, to honor my own emotional truth, and to finally allow myself to be whole. This simple, private ritual can be profoundly transformative. It is an act of declaring your own emotional sovereignty. It is drawing a line in the sand and saying, your story ends here, and my story begins. It is the moment a person stops being a haunted house and starts becoming a home for their own true self. Maya's journey isn't about blaming her parents, it's about liberating herself. Healing from inherited shame is not about erasing the past, but about understanding it so it no longer controls your present. By recognizing the voice of shame wasn't her own, she began to find hers. The path to self-acceptance begins the moment we realize that the heaviest burdens we carry were often never ours to begin with. Thanks for diving into the sacred rift. Subscribe, share your thoughts below, and join us next time to explore your inner truth and live a life that's authentically yours.